Hello everyone, this is part 31 of What If Naruto Was Trained by the Kyuubi, and I hope you guys enjoy this video and to like, to subscribe, to share, and check out the playlist, to see more comment down below. Now let's start the intro.
They call me a god. They call me a god. They call me a god.
Join my membership, the perks are great. It's in the description. Be sure to like and subscribe, it gives me more motivation. Enjoy. Natsumi began to parry the spikes that attacked her while he spun in the air, and while dodging many of them, a few nicked her in the appendages, though they were only wounds that would heal quickly enough. After several seconds of his assault, Natsumi noticed his spinning slow down, and was prepared to deliver a counterattack of her own when the time was right. However, Kimimaro had a trick up his sleeve, or rather in his skin, because the moment he stopped spinning, Natsumi got a good look at him, and saw his hands in a sealing position. With widened eyes, Natsumi jumped back from the pale boy on instinct, but it was too late. All of the bones that were protruding from Kimimaro shot out of his body, much like shrapnel would with a mine. Natsumi wasn't able to get far enough away in time to use a jutsu to escape the attack, and could only swing Shinku Kaijin once in one large arc. The arc, while protecting her vital organs, couldn't protect her from the several large rib bones that now impaled her thighs, lower stomach, and arms. Natsumi landed with a grunt, before beginning to pull out the several bones going through her body, after noticing that Kimimaro just stood there like a statue, not seeming about to strike. Once all the now bloody bones fell to the earth, she readied herself to continue the fight, but paused when she began to hear dark laughter that wasn't coming from Kimimaro, which is when her eyes widened at the implications. She quickly surveyed her body, and when she looked at her right shoulder, confirmed what she thought. Boo, Akon said, his demonized face only several inches from her own, with an evil smile on his face. How? She asked, already over her shock, and now just curious how he entered her. Oh, this, he mocked innocently. It seems that his bones, even after being expelled from his body, has both living cells as well as chakra infused in them, therefore I can hop a ride when I wish. Luckily, well for me anyway, I just picked the right bone, the one that gutted you to be precise. He explained, his lips curling upwards even more as he spoke. I see. Not yet, you don't, he retorted, before his eyes took on an icy gleam. But you will. You will see just what my words truly mean as I destroy you cell by individual cell. And he will do nothing to stop me either, no matter how much you scream and beg for a swift end. He finished coldly. I do have one question for you then. We are currently connected through my body, correct? She responded calmly, making the boy quirk a brow but nod in affirmation. And you may look like a demon, but you aren't one, are you? She questioned. No. But why would you ask such a ridiculous question right before your death? He shot back, before his eyes filled with slight fright when he saw a certain glint enter Natsumi's eyes and that same damned smirk appear again. So I can enjoy your screams, she answered, before the entire clearing was weighed down by her ki that she began to unleash, as her chakra began to swirl around her. For a moment, the clearing was silent as the ki washed over it. That is until a blood-curdling scream echoed throughout. The scream coming from Akon, who was currently rolling on his back on the ground, writhing in pain as he clawed at his skin, which at the moment appeared to be steaming before literally melting off, much like if acid was thrown on his persons. The reason for this being that although humans can gain a slight tolerance to demonic chakra the more they are exposed to it, those who've never experienced it before tend to have a hard time adjusting to the new, highly potent chakra entering their unsuspecting chakra system. Yukin's reaction being the usual reaction, at least it would be if his first experience wasn't with the chakra of the Kyuubi no Kitsune, the queen of all demons, meaning his reaction was severely worse than the norm. Its purpose done, Natsumi called off her ki as her chakra dissipated, and simply watched with obvious satisfaction Yukin's painful looking as well as sounding tea. Kimimaro himself watched on in morbid curiosity as well. Not really caring either way about the life of the boy. Only the means in which Natsumi did that to him so it wouldn't happen to him later on. Eventually Akon stopped flailing about, and actually began to crawl across the ground towards his comrade. As he did so, you could see more and more of his skin bubble and melt off his bones, which in a few spots could actually be visible by now. He dragged his burning and pain-racked body to the toes of his comrade, before he latched onto his ankles and looked up into the boy's face, chunks of his own missing. Help me. He wheezed out, holding back the urge to scream as the words flowed out of his burning tea. Kimimaro simply looked down at the S-boy with no pity in his eyes. Nothing in his eyes, in fact, as if he didn't care at all. And if how the bodyguards interacted before was any indication, he probably didn't. After a full minute of the two just staring at each other, Kimimaro finally moved by stretching out his hand, palm towards Akon, who smiled uncharacteristically at the boy's gesture. He lifted his right arm about to grab Kimimaru's, when his eyes opened in shock and his mouth in surprise, his voice trying to convey pain, but no sound escaped his lips after hearing what Kimimaru just said. You are of no more use to Orochimaru-sama. Kimimaru stated coldly, as he retracted the bone spike that he only seconds ago lodged into the middle of Yukon's skull. Natsumi looked on impassively at the boy's execution. In truth, she never figured Oto shinobi to be either merciful to their enemies nor hold any camaraderie towards their own. So Kimimaru's actions weren't a surprise to her in the least. She continued to watch the boy scr off Yukon's other arm from around his other ankle, before he unceremoniously stepped over it like it was just an obstacle in his way, much like a rock in this clearing. And people call me a monster, he was your comrade. She spoke up, in truth not really caring about the situation, really she was just bored at the moment. Those who are weak have no right to be by Orochimaru's side. And those that can't serve him any longer deserve death. He answered automatically, much like how a robot would. Clearly this boy was an unchangeable zealot of the Snake Sannin. To each their own, I suppose. She answered uncaring. You on the other hand. He said, his voice taking a tone of slight anger, and duty. Before Natsumi noticed that the cursed seal that was spread over his chest now began to spread over the rest of his body before turning his whole skin a dark brown. Quote, a strong, and need to be eliminated for the glory of Orochimaru-sama's dream. He finished, as his transformation did, making him look much like a dinosaur. Several large, thick bones now protruded out of his back pointing upward, while all down his spine bones protruded out of his skin, as well as along the 3-foot-long tail he grew. Natsumi couldn't help but smirk at the boy's new power as well as threat his words produced. She readied Shinku Kaijin in her hand, and waited to see the new skills his cursed seal level 2 form would provide him with. She wasn't disappointed when a rumbling from the ground got her attention, and she immediately jumped into the air. It was a good thing too, because a moment later what seemed to be a large forest made up of what appeared to be bones jutted out of the earth, encasing the area in its white confines. Sawarabi no Mai, Dance of the Young Ferns. Kimimaru's voice said, in almost all directions as Natsumi landed back on the ground, now surrounded by the bone forest. Well, this will certainly make things more interesting. She mentally spanned. Submit and I can guarantee you a swift and painless death. He offered, from behind her. Arigato, but I'm having too much damn fun. She answered after turning around and grinned at him. I see. He paused, before his right hand and forearm became encased in a large bone that took the shape of a twisted spear. Quote, Tessenka no Mai, Hana, Dance of the Clematis, Flower. Her brow quirked delicately. Do you honestly think you can hit me with such a large weapon? She mocked. Perhaps not, however. He paused, before reaching his hand out to touch one of the large tree trunks, when a second later his hand and the rest of him melted into the bone until he was completely gone. Quote, I don't need to move to you with such a large weapon, because I'm now completely surrounding you. He explained, and to prove his point, his spear shot out of the tree behind her and slashed across her back while she tried to evade feeling his presence at the last moment. Reminds me of Haku-chan's Maku Hushu, demonic ice crystal mirrors. Natsumi thought to herself, keeping her senses on alert for any distortion. Nice strategy, to use your Kekkei Genkai to completely surround me. She stated in almost a defeated tone, before it turned slightly mocking. Unfortunately for you, I've been training with a cute little girl whose own Kekkei Genkai jutsu is quite similar in its purpose as yours. She concluded, and no sooner did she finish talking did she slide her finger across her katana and allow her blood to flow down the blade. Hake, Shinku Kaijin, release, Crimson Ash. After she spoke those words and her blood hit the tip of the sword, the blade glowed red before it exploded in fire. That is no ordinary sword. Kimimaru, who had watched what she'd done, thought. However, if she can't hit me with it, then it's of no use to her. he concluded, remembering the advantages this particular dance of his afforded him. Had Kimimura's opponent been a normal shinobi, he'd have been right. But Natsumi was anything but normal. And to prove that point, she raised the now bladeless hilt into the air, and when all the fire circulated where the blade once resided, the flames exploded outwards in a large wave. The flames encompassed the bone forest, lighting the once white trunks on fire, quickly turning them black. After only a few moments, the entire forest was lit aflame. The fire danced across the area almost as if it was alive, and left no area of the forest bereft of its burning touch aside from a small circle where Natsumi herself stood. So she wishes to smoke me out? He mentally questioned, noticing that the heat of the flames had already begun to eat away at his jutsu. Shall we finally finish this? I believe you only have a few minutes before these flames completely eat away your forest. And I'd much rather have the satisfaction of finishing off such an interesting opponent such as you myself, than hearing you burn alive at a distance. She offered out loud, not knowing exactly where the boy was. What do you say, Kaguya? One final jutsu to end this battle. A full minute seemed to tick by in silence, aside from the sizzling of the forest burning around her, as Natsumi awaited Kimimura's answer. However, not being one to take chances on actually getting a verbal answer to determine his choice, she opened her hand before a red-colored Rasengan appeared. However, no sooner did the Rasengan appear did her arm tense under some kind of pressure, when 3 rings began to encompass the Rasengan itself, but these rings were made of pure fire. After forming her jutsu, Natsumi simply stood and waited, closing her eyes, concentrating on her other senses for any attack that were to be executed by the boy. I can't afford to be hit by whatever that is. I know it's based off the Rasengan. However, Orochimaru-sama never notified us of one like this. I'll need to completely surprise her to keep that jutsu from connecting. Kimimura thought, his mind racing for the best way to catch her off guard. Several minutes passed as Natsumi stood in the middle of the forest completely still, as the flames of her sword danced around her while continuing to leave the charred remains of the forest behind as the blackened trees fell one by one. She could feel that several of the better sneak attack trees had fallen and were now useless. However, there were still several more that were viable choices to him. She also knew that he would choose a king blow for whatever he had planned, so a single miscalculation could not be afforded. Her ears twitched as sounds sang in her ears, her nose twinged with the smell of smoke, earth and the Kaguya all around her. Her skin gained goosebumps when a new breeze blew into the forest. Finally, it seemed that she zoned out every distraction that she could, almost as if she heard, smelled, and felt nothing, just blank. She was searching for something, and wouldn't stop until she found it. There, she mentally yelled, as her eyes sprung open after feeling the barest of changes in her surroundings. She doubted that even Naruto would have noticed the change, even with his demonic senses. Hers were honed to a mastery he had yet to achieve. She pivoted on one foot, and ground the other into the earth for a sturdy foundation, before she shifted her upper body upwards, where she saw Kimimura flying towards her, his spear pointed directly at her skull. With the last few precious moments she thrust the Rasengan forward to meet his spear. Kaiten, Rasenkind, fire style, spiral blaze. She shouted when the tip of his spear impacted her jutsu. After the initial shock of the colliding forces which knocked down many of the still standing trees, the two shinobi were locked in a power struggle. Unfortunately for Kimimura, despite making his spear the strongest density he could, which at this point was even harder than steel, he never knew of just how powerful a Rasengan could be, let alone one being manipulated with elemental chakra. So when Natsumi's serious face as she looked in his eyes turned into one of through enjoyment with a happy smirk, he not only mentally questioned why, but fear was actually creeping up in the recesses of his mind when he saw her change in demeanor. It's been fun, Kaguya-san, but I win our little game, Natsumi said with a slightly strained voice. Kimimura's brow rose, before he heard something he feared, a sound of a large crack, one specifically associated with a bone breaking. And when he turned his attention to the colliding jutsu, he learned why. Several large cracks now adorned his bone spear, along with the sharp tip of the weapon now broken and what was now touching her jutsu blackening quickly. It's over. He mentally resigned, closing his eyes in defeat, hearing several more cracks on his spear. It was only a matter of seconds. Gomenasai, Orochimaru-sama. He apologized, right before he felt his spear completely shatter from his arm. Natsumi felt his weapon crumble, and noticed the resigned expression on his face, and decided on being slightly merciful towards the boy who, while not making her go all out in this fight, certainly gave her more than a worthy workout. Feeling no resistance now, she maneuvered her jutsu in front of the boy's face, and simply waited for gravity to do the rest. It was only a second later when blood, shattered pieces of skull, and brain matter exploded all over the area, and dressed Natsumi herself in a thick layer of the boy's entrails. The rest of the boy's body fell to the ground with a meaty thud, as small spurts of blood oozed out of the singed screw-like wounds that were left from Natsumi's jutsu. When the body fell, so did the rest of the forest now that its summoner was no longer in this world. Natsumi called back, Shinku Kaijin, and when all the flames were combined turned back into its unreleased form before she sheathed the blade. She looked at the entirety of the bloody clearing going over the fight in her mind, before looking back down at the fallen Kaguya, or what was left of him. You were certainly an interesting opponent. If only you were older you might have proven to be a rival to me someday. She complimented, closing her eyes for a moment. Find peace with your family, last of the Kaguya clan. She prayed, before her eyes opened and she sighed. Damn. Lost the bet. She cursed, just remembering it, and then realized how she cared the boy. Oh well, there will be other bets, she concluded, before allowing her senses to be enhanced again. I don't sense Anko, and she wasn't fighting that far away from me when we both started. Which means she either screwed up the bet like I did and went to have more fun to get out of the funk of losing, or found someone or something that was worth keeping and went back to base camp. She concluded, before she heard a voice call out to her that knocked her out of her musing. Natsumi-chan. Hana called out, when she, Anko, Yugito, and to Natsumi's surprise and annoyance Tsunade landed near her. I take it this is your handiwork? Tsunade questioned, barely hiding her disgust at the sheer brutality of the scene. What is she doing here? Natsumi questioned, slightly glaring at the cage. Couldn't be helped, Yugito answered, not liking her presence there either. After she examined the Raikage's remains and briefed some Anbu to announce his death to the rest of Kumo, she overheard Anko, Hana, and I talking about meeting up with Naru-kun, and volunteered under heavy threat to come with us. She explained, making Natsumi snort indignantly. And you didn't just incapacitate her because too troublesome, Anko answered boredly, getting a snort from Tsunade herself at the mere idea that any of those three could best her even at her age. Very well, she sighed out. Tsunade, I will warn you now, you should be prepared to see some things that most would find grotesque even for war. So if you get the smart idea to try to stop Naru-kun, don't. Because I will take great pleasure in stopping you if you try. We are here for our own ends, it just so happens that yours are along the same path. She finished, making her threat very clear to the cage, who simply nodded. Let's go, he might finish before we get there, Yugito suggested. He better not be. Anko, Hana and Natsumi mentally shouted, before all the women nodded and jumped off in the direction that Naruto jumped towards when getting past the Oto bodyguards Anko and Natsumi just defeated. With Naruto. So you've finally come for round 2 NE Naruto-kun. Orochimaru's teasing voice called out to him on the other side of the clearing that Naruto stood in. You know for a fact had Anko-chan not been there, a round 2 wouldn't have been needed. Naruto stated calmly, noting the dozen or so Konoha, and soon as shinobi corpses scattered throughout the clearing. No doubt his handiwork, the Hanyu thought while surveying the severed boss. Still harboring that ill attempt at morality and honor. How quaint, makes me recall my fresh genin days. The pale man responded wistfully. Perhaps, but at least when I'll with a cleaner conscience than you ever will. He shot back, before he began to slowly walk towards the Sannin. I suppose, but there is one problem with your statement. He paused, before a superior smirk dressed his lips. I will never I've already perfected my immortality jutsu. He explained happily. Upon hearing this, Naruto stopped his feet and narrowed his eyes slightly, towards the smiling man. No doubt at the cost of others, like Anko-chan, and Natsu-chan. He said, a slight growl rumbling in his tea, which only made Orochimaru's grin increase. And if that is the case, then I'll just have to make sure that by the time I'm finished with you there won't be enough of you to still be considered an existence. He promised, before slowly unsheathing, Sautenkais, which seemed to hum in anticipation of this fight, knowing just how much its master desired it. Unfortunately for Naruto, before he could even take another step towards the Snake Sannin, another player entered the field. Gomen Naruto-kun, but Orochimaru-sama has much more pressing matters to attend to than to deal with the likes of you. The visage and voice of the new speaker made Naruto's body grow rigid in anger, and wasn't able to hold back the guttural growl which escaped his teeth. Therefore your opponent will be me. And I assure you I will not let you get past me like Sound 4 did. He finished, before brandishing twin kunai, one in each hand. Ka. Bu. 2. Naruto growled lowly, his teeth clenched together as he pronounced each syllable distinctly, with his grip tightening on his katana making his knuckles go white from the pressure. Oh, you remember me. I'm quite flattered, Naruto-kun, I didn't know I left such an impact in your life. Kabuto replied in a pseudo-friendly tone, after hearing his name. Oh, you did, Naruto answered, as he began to walk forward with slow deliberate steps, keeping his eyes solely on the silver-haired man, while remembering everything that occurred to Hana thanks to him. And now you will SD for it, he guaranteed, before disappearing after his foot next touched the ground. Kabuto smirked, and disappeared while rushing to meet the orange-haired Hanyu, as Orochimaru just looked on in amusement and interest. He heard the single clash of metal, before seeing both Naruto and Kabuto appear again, but now on the opposite sides of the clearing than where they began. He awaited with morbid curiosity to see who now had the upper hand, since he didn't want to spoil the surprise, and looked away at the last moment before they reached each other. You've gotten faster, Naruto complimented, before several DSS of blood fell to the ground from the shallow cross slash that now ran across his chest. Arigato, and so have you since what I witnessed back in the Chunin exam finals. Kabuto returned with a smile, before it turned into a painful grimace as a meaty thud could be heard. The reason for this being that Kabuto's left arm up to his bicep was now on the ground with the kunai still in his GS. Kabuto quickly began to heal the wound, knowing that trying such a delicate operation such as a limb reattachment in the middle of a fight would be He simply hoped that even with only one arm he could finish Naruto off soon enough that the limb wouldn't before he could reattach it. Once the wound was closed, he turned to face Naruto again. You're wrong, Kabuto, you stated that in a fashion which implied that I trained after the Chunin exams to get as fast as I am now. Quote. Naruto responded, after swiping his blade to get the excess blood off, with his own wound already healed. What you don't seem to realize is that, I've been this fast the entire time, since the moment I returned to Konoha. You've simply grown slightly less weak compared to me in the past 3 years, whereas I haven't changed at all. And I'm sure I can say the same for your master as well. Had he not used Anko-chan, I'd have easily killed him. He concluded, looking back at Kabuto with the same coldness he held before. Kabuto himself narrowed his eyes at Naruto's words. You can make fun of his skills as much as you like, but when you cross that line by disrespecting his master, nothing will save you. Kabuto's anger began to boil, and before he even realized it, the mental dam broke, and he began to feel a dormant power begin to surface. Naruto quirked a brow when he felt and saw a change in Kabuto. His chakra seemed to spike and concentrate on a singular emotion, rage. Not only that, but Kabuto's body seemed to have gotten bigger, his toned muscles bulged slightly, stretching the clothes he wore. But the most prominent change, at least physically, were his eyes. Instead of his deep brown eyes that appeared almost black, they turned a dark teal, and the outer whites of his eyes became bloodshot red. Is that Aodai Chishio, old blood? From what Natsu-chan told me, I figured it became extinct, seeing as not even she knew what that Kekkei Genkai truly did, other than its physical manifestation. Naruto stated in slight surprise. Kabuto stayed silent at Naruto's words and without warning charged at the Hanyu. Naruto prepared for the one-armed boy to strike, but was surprised when Kabuto got close and out of nowhere jumped over him, so he landed in between himself and Orochimaru. In a fluid motion after landing, Kabuto pocketed his kunai and began to do one-handed seals, before taking in a deep breath. Kaiten, Heisukishu, fire style, burning, ashiculation. He shouted, as he released his breath, but ash escaped his mouth instead and quickly surrounded Naruto. Seeing this, Kabuto bit his front teeth together, which ignited the ash. The flames raged towards the enveloped Hanyu, before exploding when the large ash ball ignited. Kabuto watched in suspicious wonderment if he got Naruto, though his shinobi sense was telling him no. Unfortunately, that same sense wasn't able to pick up Naruto fast enough when he rushed out of the smoking cloud right at Kabuto seemingly uninjured. A single flash of metal crossed Kabuto's vision before searing pain racked his body, and a second later nothing, only darkness. Orochimaru watched this battle with amusement until this point. He was now regretting Kabuto taking on the Jinchuriki. He thought that the extra 3 years of training had given Kabuto enough strength to at least match Naruto in battle. He was sorely mistaken and he mentally cursed himself, especially since he just witnessed his best medic, as well as most loyal servant BSD horizontally several times across his body, before said body exploded in a cloud of blood and fell to the earth in pieces. He wasn't joking about his abilities. I was only able to catch 2 slashes of his sword, when at least 8 were dealt to the body. His strength and speed are in a league which few shinobi have ever or could ever claim. The snake Sannin thought. Now it's just us. Naruto's emotionless voice called to the snake. So it seems, Orochimaru said back, sounding rather distracted as he continued to gaze at his fallen follower. But do you really think you can take me all by yourself? I'll admit that you are good, but good enough to take on a man who's defied the Shinigami himself. A man who has been hailed a genius since he was 8 years old. Who's created more kenjutsus than anyone in history. A man who has made himself immortal. He questioned, tearing his gaze from what was left of Kabuto, now landing it upon Naruto. I have no wish to hear about your delusions of grandeur, Orochimaru. This fight will be our last, and I don't need a warm-up, so I have absolutely no need to hold back my power any longer. Naruto stated before pausing, making the Sannin quirk a brow in curiosity, before his knees buckled from a tremendous ki that now weighed down the area, as Naruto released all the chakra contained in his 5 tails. Let us begin. He finished with a menacingly cold tone. So he was holding back this whole time, and even in our little fight in the forest, how interesting. Orochimaru thought, while regaining his balance once the ki dissipated from the clearing. You're certainly stronger than I gave you credit for, Naruto-kun. But as I said the last time we fought, strength alone will not decide a shinobi battle. He stated, before falling on his stomach, opened his mouth and released hundreds upon hundreds of snakes from his mouth. Quote, Mandara no Jin, myriad snake net formation. He was able to speak out, as the snakes sheared towards Naruto like a wave, not allowing Naruto to see the other group of snakes shear out of Orochimaru's sleeve and burrow into the ground. Naruto just watched unaffected as the wave of snakes continued their charge while hissing venomously at their target. As if without a care in the world, Naruto began to move slowly, grabbing Sautenkais, and dropped into a Batojutsu stance, with all of his weight on his back leg before he let out a slow breath and flicked the sword just barely out of the sheath, while his finger nipped the blade. Hake, Sautenkais, release, Azure breeze. He whispered, before spinning the rest of the blade from its home in a large horizontal arc. As the blade cut through the air, it burst into a visible blue wind, and as Naruto swung the blue hilt, the wind extended outwards. The blue arc grew large as it sailed through the air towards the snakes, before it impacted the hissing reptiles. Though no sooner did it do so did the crescent of wind chakra right through the snakes like paper. Once the energy finished going through the snakes which were lopped in half with NSD into small pieces from the invisible remnants of wind chakra before disappearing in a large plum of smoke. The smoke dissipated quickly and Naruto just looked back towards the Sannin with Sautenkais back in its blade form, only for his eyes to widen ever so slightly when he finally saw the snakes showing out of his sleeve and into the ground. Realizing what was coming, Naruto disappeared from his current position only for a snake with his Kusanagi in its mouth to erupt from the ground where Naruto was just standing. Naruto reappeared a few yards away, only to disappear once more with another snake erupting. This same sequence went on for nearly a full minute, until Naruto stopped moving, now standing in the middle of the dozens of snakes that hung in the air like trees, with Kusanagi in each mouth, all pointing at him from above. Naruto narrowed his eyes, and grunted before disappearing towards the Sannin, knowing that he could outrun the snakes. The second he moved, the snakes descended from the sky in an attempt to skewer him. He weaved in and out of any snakes that got in his way, but skidded to a stop when dozens more erupted from the ground in front of him, locking him in a pincer attack. Naruto, realizing his position, flipped, Sautenkase, in his hand and embedded it into the ground before closing his eyes with the snakes from both sides coming ever closer. Kitsune Ise Ru, Kitsune Shippo no Mai, Fox Cry Sword Style, Dance of the Fox Tail. He said, as a purple pulse trailed down the blade, before a purple spike of chakra emerged from the ground in the shape of a fox tail and wrapped itself protectively around Naruto. The snakes immediately impacted the barrier, while hissing in both frustration and rage at their target, as Naruto just kept the flow of chakra going. A full minute of the stalemate passed before Naruto seemed to have grown frustrated, and began to do one-handed seals, which caused the onlooking Sannin to widen his eyes at the concentration Naruto must be using to keep both the barrier up as well as use a completely separate jutsu. Naruto finished sealing before taking a knee and slammed the same hand to the ground. Doten, Iwa Yado Kuzushi, Earth Style, Stone Lodging Destruction. He shouted, when dozens of rock shards from the holes the snakes made when shooting out of the ground levitated, before shooting towards his barrier. Soon the snakes who were once the attackers, were now the defenders as the rocks sped through them mercilessly. No sooner did the earth technique begin did the snakes vanish in small plumes of smoke, which finally allowed Naruto to release his barrier. The Hanyu got up off the ground, and looked right at Orochimaru, as he himself got up. You have no chance to win, Orochimaru. You have no hostages to use against me this time, and my power far dwarfs your own as I am now. Even with 3 more years to get stronger, you are still nowhere near my level. I will not ask you to beg for mercy or your life, because the moment you harmed those important to me, your life has been over. Therefore I ask you to do only one thing for me, scream. Naruto said emotionlessly, with a sadistic and vengeful glint in his eye. Orochimaru simply smirked at his words and chuckled lightly. And you think your little speech will make me give up so easily? True, you seem to have many tricks up your sleeve, but so do I, Naruto-kun. He said before opening his mouth to allow the legendary Kusanagi out. And knowing how this sword can affect demons, this battle is far from over. Don't be so quick to judge. I am far from losing this battle, and even farther from losing this war. He stated with finality. Nothing more was said between the two fighters before they disappeared from their spots, and sounds of metal clashing against metal could be heard all throughout the clearing, along with sparks that flew for the same reason. I see. He was even trained to such a degree in the art of the sword. This proves my theory. Konoha was not the one to train him, they were never ones to consider swordsmanship worth the trouble of teaching. And after Itachi-kun's and my own defection, the village wouldn't be so quick to allow someone to gain strength of this caliber without insurance they wouldn't defect as well. So I can only conclude that he was at least partially trained by the Kyuubi no Kitsune herself, with how their close interaction during the invasion was. Orochimaru thought while they continued to cross swords. Perhaps I was too impatient to deal with her brats. Instead I should have befriended the beast and learned from her before I dealt with her children, he concluded, though throwing the thought out quickly, realizing that past mistakes are ones to learn from, not dwell on. Orochimaru blocked a slash that would have beheaded him, before he pinned the tip of Naruto's blade to the ground. He then cupped his left hand before his fingertips lit ablaze with purple chakra symbols burning within the center. The Sannin smirked at Naruto before he thrust his hand forward and sunk them into Naruto's prone stomach right where his seal was. Gokyu Fuan, 5 Elements Seal. He said with a gleeful hiss, before looking up to see the horror-stricken face of his opponent, but was shocked to see AS expression the man's features. Was that supposed to do something? Naruto questioned lowly. How? You shouldn't be able to produce any chakra from the Kyuubi any longer. Naruto's response was to swiftly grab Orochimaru's left wrist, effectively holding him in place. It's over, Orochimaru, he said, swiftly flipping Sautenkase in such a manner that caused the Kusanagi to go flying out of the Sannin's GS, before Orochimaru felt a cold steel tip pressed his own stomach. Kitsune Ise Ru, Kisyun no Mai, Fox Cry Sword Style, Dance of the Fox Claw. He whispered to the Sannin. Orochimaru gasped in pain, as he felt Naruto's sword L right through him 150 times, all throughout his body. Oddly enough, however, the Sannin only felt his body as a whole in pain, not each individual thrust, because of the sheer speed of them. Once the sobbing ceased, he felt his body gain a new wave of pain, as he felt his blood begin leave him. He stumbled back as soon as Naruto released him from his grasp, and felt his legs grow weak from pain and numbness from blood loss, before losing his ability to stand only to fall to his knees. His blood pulled around him as it ran like rivers down his body and clothing, while he just stared at the Hanyu who simply stared back. I told you, Orochimaru, this time I would not be holding back. Naruto stated coldly before turning around and began to walk away, never seeing the bloody smile that graced the Sanin's lips. And I told you, you will need more than just strength to beat me, Naruto-kun. Orochimaru gurgled out in between spurts of blood that flooded from his mouth, his words making Naruto stop and turn back before his eyes narrowed at what he witnessed next. Quote, Ninpu, Hebi Monuke, ninja art, snake skin shed. He watched as Orochimaru seemed to look like he was throwing up something that was larger than he could possibly swallow. Naruto watched in morbid curiosity as whatever it was finally reached the Sanin's mouth before it shot out of his jaw. No sooner did whatever it was do that did it open up the man's mouth to inhuman degrees, and that was when Naruto realized what it was. It was Orochimaru himself. He somehow created a jutsu that allowed himself to regurgitate himself, and from how this new Orochimaru looked it also healed all his wounds that the skin he just ejected himself from had sustained, making the name of the jutsu much more than just a name. Orochimaru now stood straight and tall with a smug smirk on his lips, looking as good as new, albeit much more slimy than before. You shouldn't underestimate someone who's created more kinjutsus than you could possibly fathom. He advised again, his voice sounding just as normal and smug as he looked. You're right about that. I should have made sure that you were Naruto stated emotionlessly after getting over the Sanin's rebirth, and got back into a fighting stance. Quote, I won't make the same mistake again. He stated with finality. Though in truth I'm kind of glad, because Anko-chan, Natsu-chan and Hana-chan would have killed me had you actually SD. He thought in the back of his mind, shivering at just imagining the reactions the three would have at the news of the snake's untimely deaths. You know you have me at a disadvantage now that my sword is all the way over there. Orochimaru spoke up, pointing in the direction of his sword. Why don't we fight like shinobi? He offered with a smile that was too sweet to be real. Naruto grunted recognition on what the snake was trying to pull, trying to even the playing field by using his honor against him, and unfortunately it worked. Naruto stood from his stance and sheathed Sautenkei's before it poofed from his hip, which made the Sanin's smile widen before he began to chuckle. My, what a fool you are, Naruto-kun. I'd have expected the Kyuubi to have taught you better than that. He laughed and bit his thumb, before slamming it into the ground. Quote, Kuchio's no jutsu, summoning. He shouted as a large plum of smoke engulfed much of the clearing. Naruto guessed that it was a snake, and a large one at that considering the smoke's volume. Even in spars with Anko he never saw that much smoke when she summoned. His answer was given when the smoke dissipated and the enormous purple and black steeped form of Manda, the leader of the snake summonings, appeared with Orochimaru standing atop his head. This was actually the one snake that Anko herself was never allowed to summon due to a prior incident which she had never fully divulged to Naruto. Using a summon to do your fighting for you, Orochimaru. Naruto yelled up at the Sanin. Why have you summoned me, Orochimaru? You realize that you must give me sacrifices to barter my cooperation. The large snake hissed out. I have summoned you for the simple task of ridding this war of that man. He answered, pointing to Naruto. As for the you may enjoy the boss of the fallen Suna, Leaf, and Whirlpool Shinobi once we win. Manda nodded in acceptance, before taking his first look at his first victim, only to hiss angrily when looking upon Naruto and his obviously non-human appendages. You realize we are fighting a Hanyu, and not just any Hanyu. A Hanyu who is the Jinchuriki of the Kyuubi no Kiyun. The snake questioned. Of course I realize who we are fighting, do not take me for a fool. Orochimaru growled out, not liking that his own summon was questioning his intelligence. Very well, for this encounter I will need 1000 sacrifices. A Hanyu such as this will not be easy, it hissed back, getting a nod from the pale man. Naruto watched their interaction carefully, and couldn't help but mentally chuckle when Orochimaru got offended at the snake's question. However, that quickly changed when he disappeared from where he was standing when a tail appeared above him and smacked into the ground, making the ground shake. He is much faster than I gave a creature that size credit for. Naruto mused, after reappearing several yards away. However, considering that Orochimaru is who I want, I'll have to deal with Manda quickly. He concluded. With his next move set, Naruto set it in motion when he launched towards Manda, whom watched the Hanyu closely, before opening his mouth. Juro Doku Senbon, sprinkling poison needles. He hissed, as dark purple needles shot about his maw towards Naruto. Naruto, hearing his jutsu, looked up and saw the needles coming, before quickly disappearing and reappearing a yard away where the first wave of needles embedded the ground. He had to continue to dodge the needles while racing towards the snake, before he finally reached the place where Manda's body rose from the ground. Manda, being unable to use his jutsu any longer thanks to Naruto's proximity, decided to go the old-fashioned way and bared his fangs, which de-sped and glistened with poisonous saliva, before he lunged directly below where Naruto now stood. Naruto, either oblivious or not caring, didn't try to avoid the bite as it came hurling towards him, and simply gripped his right hand into a tight fist, and sealed it back. Gomen, Manda-san. Naruto apologized quietly, before unleashing his punch upon the snake's underbelly, while twisting his fist when it impacted its target. The large impact resounded through the clearing when the hit occurred. Said hit actually making Manda's descending head to stop immediately, as the snake's eyes widened in shock, and its mouth turned from one of anger to one of great pain. When the sound disappeared, Orochimaru was looking at the situation with little amusement, but held his tongue to see just what occurred. The answer was given as soon as Manda's mouth closed, bulged, and then quickly opened once again, releasing a torrent of blood which rained upon the ground, as well as Naruto himself, who still had his arm embedded in the snake's underbelly. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes, after realizing that with the amount of blood his summon was losing, it wouldn't last much longer before it SD, let alone stay in this plane of existence to fight for him. So knowing this fact, he jumped off the head and hand-sealed, preparing an attack of his own, seeing that Naruto was not paying attention at the moment. However, his sneak attack was averted when Manda exploded in a cloud of smoke, signaling his return to the summoning realm. With the smoke disrupting his vision, Orochimaru couldn't tell what happened with Naruto now that Manda wasn't around to occupy his attention. His answer came in the form of a fist erupting through the smoke from below and connected with his face. Hard. Despite his velocity from gravity, it seemed that the punch was strong enough to propel Orochimaru back into the sky, as well as break parts of his skull in several places. Completely dazed from the power of the punch, being reminded of one of Tsunde's more devastating punches during one of the times that Jiraiya had tricked her into thinking he had been the one peeking on her in the hot springs. Unfortunately for him, he wasn't given enough time to dwell on those thoughts, nor to even recuperate, because another punch just like the one before invaded his stomach, causing him to spit up a mouthful of blood. Another punch swiftly connected with the right side of his ribs, making him grunt in pain, knowing that at least 3 broke from that. This same kind of beating continued for several more seconds, though Orochimaru himself would have sworn it to be an eternity. A reprieve was finally given as he began to fall back to earth, before several furry things clamped down around him, not allowing him to move an inch, as a body to appear behind him. He immediately knew what jutsu Naruto was going to use. He had seen this same jutsu used 3 years ago with that grotesquely dressed boy, who admired Konoha's resident taijutsu master, Rock Lee, if he recalled the name correctly. He looked towards the ground with widened eyes, recalling the devastation this jutsu could do not only on the environment it collided with, but the victim of it as well. I don't know whether you'll survive this, Orochimaru. Naruto's cold voice carried over the whizzing of air into the Sanin's ear. But I'll be ready for you if you do, Naruto said as they both looked towards the ground before Naruto began to spin them both like a top. Quote. Omote Range, frontal lotus. Naruto called out as he released his tails from Orochimaru only yards from impacting the ground. The earth shook as Orochimaru impacted the earth, leaving a large crater in his wake, with the upper half of his body buried under the ground, and his lower half lying limply in the air. Naruto stared down at his opponent with unflinching eyes while standing at the edge of the crater, and simply waited. I highly doubt that he is that man is far too annoying to be ked like this, he thought after several minutes passed as he continued to watch the unmoving body. Another minute passed before Naruto's eyes dilated slightly when he noticed the body move, however it wasn't in the way he expected. The lower half of Orochimaru's body literally deflated and fell to the ground, much like a blown-up balloon would once it was relinquished of air. This action caused Naruto to look wide-eyed at the implications, but before he could take any action, another earthquake rocked the clearing. Naruto on impulse jumped away as close to the forest edge as possible, awaiting what the Sannin had planned. However, what he witnessed next was something he would have never imagined during this fight, yet even so he wasn't surprised considering it was Orochimaru who he was fighting. From under the ground arose a humongous 8-headed white snake, which dwarfed Manda's stature almost twofold, and more than likely stalled many battles going on considering the snake rose high enough into the sky to be seen from a great distance away. The snake's heads hissed back and forth while lolling to and fro, before, as if thinking the same thought, zoned in on the small orange spot that now represented Naruto in their vision. They hissed in unison, which sounded more like deafening horn. At least to Naruto, who had to cover his ears lest he go deaf thanks to his advanced hearing. Once the hissing receded, he uncovered his ears, and looked back towards the large snake, and finally saw his true opponent. Orochimaru staring down at him with that same crazed smile on his lips within the recesses of one of the heads more. Or at least his upper half, since the rest of him seemed to be fused together with the middle snake head. My, you certainly aren't pulling any punches like most shinobi do, Naruto-kun. If I hadn't created my Hebi Monuke, that probably would have killed me, especially with the damage you dealt. I could tell that not only were many of my ribs broke, but one of them snapped into my lung, causing me to bleed internally. It was quite painful while I prepared myself to not only use the Hebi Monuke, but also one of my greatest, strongest and a personal favorite jutsu of mine, the Yamato no Jutsu, 8 branches technique. With it I will repay the kindness you showed me a few moments ago, please accept it graciously. He offered, though his voice now took on an even more snake-like quality to it. No sooner did he finish speaking did the other 7 heads launch towards Naruto with their maws ready to strike him down. Naruto, knowing he couldn't summon Natsumi since he had no idea if she was done fighting, nor having enough time to contact her mentally to find out, grunted in annoyance, before he bit his thumb and summoned Sautenkate once more. Noticing the little time he had before the heads would reach him, he adjusted the black sheath to his hip, and once again took the same Batojutsu stance from before. He gripped the hilt of his sword tightly, and in a single motion pulled it out of its sheath, and swung it in a diagonally horizontal arc in the direction of the incoming snakes. Kitsune Isei Ryu, Kitsune Hoku, Fox Cry sword style, Fox Roar. He yelled, as Sautenkate SD through the air, before purple chakra encased the blade, and when the sword finished its arc the chakra shot forth from it in a crescent shape at its target. Orochimaru, knowing the powers that sword wielded, considered an attack like this, and called upon his snakes to evade the chakra wave. Although the heads began to evade, they miscalculated the speed of it, and as it passed the main body, 2 of the heads were lopped off, before falling to the ground making craters from their mass. The beam continued upwards, disappearing behind the clouds, leaving 5 heads left, which after dodging the beam continued towards their target. Naruto disappeared from his spot right when the 5 heads slammed into the ground, before they recovered and shot upwards, where Naruto was now sailing upwards in the sky after reappearing. He watched as the snakes climbed up towards him, their fangs glistening in the sun's rays. He once again summoned more chakra into the blade, making it glow purple once more before launching another Kitsune Hoku downwards. With the surprise attack coming at him, only 4 of the heads could evade it, before it cut the last one in half, sending it back down to slam into the earth with a bloody crash. The snakes were reaching their targets all too quickly, while Naruto just continued to release Kitsune Hokus one after another. The snakes dodged the onslaught, however the closer they got to Naruto the harder it was to dodge the waves. And by the time they finally reached him, there was only 1 head remaining before Naruto narrowed his eyes as the snake's mouth encircled him and snapped shut, swallowing its dinner. How the mighty have fallen. Shame too, I'd have loved to have experimented on him. Hanyas are a rare breed. Orochimaru smirked as he witnessed the demise of his opponent. Unfortunately for the snake Sannin, his victory was short-lived, when he saw the remaining snake's belly begin to bulge. The snake itself released a pain-filled hiss before its eyes widened, and the next moment its stomach exploded as its top half was sent careening into the air. Scales and blood scattered throughout the clearing as its bottom half fell lifelessly to the ground right before a slime-ridden Naruto landed in front of it. Orochimaru narrowed his eyes at the still-living Hanyu, as well as the final head landing in the background with a meaty thud. So you survived. I'm surprised, but glad. The white-skinned man said warmly, though knowing the situation it wasn't for the reason of Naruto's health. That I am, but you won't be for much longer, I'm afraid. I've allowed you enough fun and games for your last moments on this earth. But now I believe it's about time I actually get serious and finish this. Naruto retorted coldly, while sheathing Sautenkei's, allowing it to puff out of existence, before a Rasengan formed in his right hand. Fumitsuo no Rasengan, spiraling fist of the immortal king. He said, and like back in the Chunin exams, the Rasengan climbed up his arm to and a little past his shoulder. The jutsu he used caused Orochimaru's eyes to widen, as he remembered the devastation it caused within the arena of the finals. Unfortunately, the sheer size of his transformation basically made it impossible for him to dodge the jutsu, especially at the speeds Naruto could move, and if his words just moments ago were true, he'd be even faster now. And sure enough, he was right, because only a split second after Naruto disappeared from his spot and immediately after, Orochimaru felt a painful drilling sensation on the lower part of his snake body. He looked down to see Naruto's arm indented into him, before he saw the chakra in his arm begin to recede towards his fist, and felt a spike in chakra where the fist was pressing against his body. His eyes widened in horror once he realized what was going to happen, but it was too late. All the energy used to power Naruto's Fumitsuo no Rasengan collected into his fist before he released the chakra into the snake's body, much like how a Hyuga does with their Juken. Orochimaru could feel the burning sensation of Naruto's foreign chakra enter his body, but before he could even scream out in pain, the spinning chakra literally exploded throughout his body. Naruto had jumped back the moment he released the chakra into Orochimaru and simply waited for the end result, which he didn't have to wait too long for. Only a few seconds passed before the snake's underbelly bulged and twisted. Just like when he used his normal Rasengan to escape the snake that ate him, only this time the bulge didn't stop there. As the chakra continued coursing through the white snake's body, it bulged as well until the entire thing was bloated to almost twice its size. Orochimaru could feel the burning sensation of Naruto's chakra flow all throughout him, and as he screamed out in pain at the feeling of both the chakra and the disfigurement of his body reached its limit and exploded in a blender-like motion. Now an even larger cloud of blood than before spread across the sky as large chunks of whatif and fresh blood rained down upon the entirety of the clearing, leaving nearly no stone untouched by the crimson liquid. Naruto watched as all this come to pass, and didn't bat an eye as the and blood began to fall. He merely watched on, waiting to see if Orochimaru had pulled yet another miracle out of his box of tricks. The blood began to slow to a drizzle as the final bits of squished against the ground, and to both Naruto's surprise and annoyance he heard a choked cough several yards away from him. He walked slowly towards the sound before he rounded one of the larger pieces of that was scattered around, and saw the fallen human form of Orochimaru lying on his back looking up towards the sky. The pale man panted for breath as sweat rolled down his forehead and with his blood dancing down his body and clothing before hitting the ground. Naruto noticed the look of exhaustion in the normally smirking Sannin, and was able to hear the man's heartbeat and lungs pumping double time to try to allow blood and air to reach the destinations as fast as possible. That was your trump card, wasn't it? Naruto asked, making his presence to the Sannin known since the downed man seemed to either not care or not notice him. Orochimaru simply continued to breath heavily, ignoring his question, and just stared blankly towards the sky. Naruto walked up to him until he was standing just before his head and looked directly down at his face, only for his eyes to narrow dangerously when Orochimaru turned to mud. That will be all for this video. Be sure to like, subscribe, share, and comment down below for more videos. Goodbye.